Well, Governor, I have to ask you first, have you made a decision on whether to run for president?
Oh, you're going to jump right into it,
I
huh?
think we got to get this done.
Yeah. No, haven't made a decision.
Okay. All the politicos seem to say that the window is close to closing for anybody who wants to get in. Do you have a plan on when to make a decision?
Oh, I think I have to make a decision within a few weeks.
Yeah.
And I said all along that I'd pay first attention to my duty in Indiana, which on April 29th, that evening, our legislature concluded its work. And so then started the time, started the clock on coming to some conclusion.
Right. What do you think of Paul Ryan's proposal, the path to prosperity, as he calls it?
I think it's terrific. I think it's a clear and visionary and courageous plan. As with any such plan, there are things that you can differ with. There's some things missing. He didn't treat Social Security, which we have to save. We have to have a new Social Security system, and not changing it for today, but for younger people who will come along. But in general, I thought it was the boldest and bravest effort that we've seen, and it's already improved the debate, and so it's a real contribution.
It does address Medicare, and in the several days since, a number of Republican congressmen have gotten beaten up by Democrats and by some constituents who are terribly upset over this. Is the lesson that this is an issue that elected officials just still can't touch?
No, better not be, because it'll wreck America if that's the case. The lesson is that there's a lot of misunderstanding and disinformation. You know, the people making these attacks know better. Ryan didn't say change anything for today's Medicare recipients or even those who will come along in the next 10 years or so. You know, what people will eventually understand is the real enemies of Medicare, the enemies of Social Security, are these people who are saying leave them as they are. They will explode or implode. And so Ryan and people who want to head a similar direction are out to save the safety net. And but the debate had to start somewhere, and it started with the usual demagoguery. And I just think over time the American people will show they're a little bit smarter than that.
One of your predecessors as OMB director, also a colleague from the Reagan days, David Stockman, wrote recently, quote, "We are about to descend into class war because the Obama plan picks on the rich when it should be pushing tax increases for all, while the Ryan plan attacks the poor when it should be addressing middle-class entitlements and defense," unquote. Is he right?
Oh, there are elements of that may be right. I don't think that's exactly the winning way to sell his program. No, I quite agree that everything has to be looked at. So yes, I think we ought to constantly examine our defense commitments, make sure that they are all absolutely essential to the physical and economic security of Americans. But you know, the principal fault here is with those who have exploded the size and cost of our federal government, committed us to bills we'll never be able to pay, endangered Social Security and Medicare beyond any hope unless we make changes, at least in the out years.
In a speech, you have likened the U.S. fiscal situation to a foreign power advancing an army to our border. But we know that many people find the fiscal situation abstract. It's just a bunch of numbers. Can you make it concrete so that they will feel the urgency about this that you feel?
I hope that we can as a people. Look, debt and its consequences became very concrete and very personal for tens of millions of Americans recently. And I don't know what could be more real than the experience many Americans have had having gotten overextended themselves or someone in their family or their business that they once worked for. And I do believe that that's already led to some changes. There's a lot more concern that the nation could go broke with terrible consequences, especially for low-income people. And so it's the beginning of wisdom. We got a long way to go, of course. People have been, I said earlier, completely misled about a lot of things, and they deserve to hear them explained truthfully.
There is a view that the country never addresses tough issues like this until there's a crisis. Do you think that if dramatic change isn't made, there will be a crisis, or will it just be slow decline?
You better hope it's slow decline. If we do nothing, the best we can hope for is slow decline. And that'd be terrible. To me, that'd be unacceptable. It would mean that the American dream of people who can start on the first rung of the ladder and move up is over. It would mean that the American anchor of a stable and hopeful, optimistic middle class would be over. But it's not the worst possible outcome, as your question points out. In this world, markets can turn on a debtor very suddenly.
Right. And that is the crisis that I hear others talking about, including the several former chiefs of the Council of Economic Advisors who signed that letter, that the bond market may turn on the United States. And if it happens, the consequences would make our most recent crisis look minor.
That's right. And so the real question is, can our democracy have a reasonable discussion about this? This is not particularly debatable.
Right.
I mean, folks can have an honest disagreement about how big or small the government ought to be, what it ought to stick its nose into or not. But to deny that we are at and headed for debt levels that just mathematically cannot be supported, that would be dishonest, completely dishonest. And so if we start with an agreement about the arithmetic, I don't know how you can fail to agree that we have to take some kind of direct action and soon.
Right. You have also said in a speech earlier this year, should the best way, meaning at that time the best way to greatness for the country, be blocked, then someone will need to find the second best way or the third, because the nation's survival requires it. What's the best way? If you could write it yourself, what's the best way?
We would start new safety net programs out in the future that say to ourselves and the world, the United States is not going broke, not going to go over a cliff. Right. We would dramatically reform the tax system in a way, by the way, that I hear Republicans and Democrats agreeing about the outlines of. Let's get rid of the tax preferences, most of which benefit the wealthy more than anyone else. Let's have lower, flatter rates, because we can do all the bold things that some people think are too bold with regard to spending, including defense and the rest of the federal government. And it won't suffice if the economy doesn't grow at a very rapid rate. And so really an emergency program for economic growth. I'm also in favor of at least temporarily setting aside some of the regulations which make it almost impossible to start a business and hire people in this country. There are other ways to do it and make certain that we still protect vital interests like the environment and worker safety and so forth.